Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at E Green Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ebony Green. I'm super excited to be in community with you all today. Today, I'm going to start with a story time. So a couple of days ago, I actually had caught up with a friend that I hadn't talked to in a while. We were talking, and people naturally ask about how's your family. I asked how his family was, and he mentioned that his daughter was doing really well. And I sometimes people so long that you met the kids when they were little, and now they're grown, and so we were chatting about the idea or the fact that she had come out as LGBTQ. And I was like, wow, bro, that's dope. Like, that's so dope that you're so supportive and her mom is supportive. And he was like, oh, I have to be really transparent. I actually wasn't supportive. I wasn't that, my first reaction wasn't to be supportive. And I was like, oh, wow. And I consider this person like a really just dope human being. And so I was like, oh, wow, like what helped you kind of move? Because when he was talking about it, he was really excited and like, yeah, she's doing so well. I met her partner. And so I was like, oh, like, well, what helped you transition? And he was like, oh, you and me had a conversation several years ago about like your experience. And I was like, oh. And so, I had forgotten that we even had that conversation. And so like several years we had just talked about like culturally, I can only speak from my perspective or my experience, but, ultimately, when a person, particularly a child of color, specifically a Black child comes out as gay, sometimes if you're Caribbean, or sometimes that can be an issue, right? Or it could be very uncomfortable, especially if your community doesn't really embrace you. So you're already a young person, already struggling to kind of figure out where you fit. And then you get to this place where now you've been brave enough to say it out loud. And unfortunately, you're alienated, right? And so I said to him like, wow, like I didn't even believe or remember that we had that conversation. He said, I first sat with the information she told me, and then I looked and I saw your book up on my bookshelf, and I thought about, wow, like my sis had already shared and been really transparent and vulnerable about her experience. And I'm not saying that everybody in my life was like, you're going to hell. But what I am saying is that it was not necessarily a really pleasant experience. And some of the people that I expected to support me didn't, and some of the people I thought wouldn't did. So take that for what it is. It's less about the story I told him, but it was more about this idea that he had heard what I had said and took it in and understood that he had this opportunity that he could be very different with his daughter. He could be very different with the ways in which he engaged her and the comfort he provided her. And, what was really wild, and I said this to him on the call, like, man, I didn't realize that when we talk about breaking generational curses, that like sometimes our storytelling will break someone else's curse and not necessarily our own, right? And so as a result of that conversation, I was like, man, I want to share this with y'all, but I also want to share 3 things that I think are important to kind of lift up that story. So one is, why do we tell stories, right? I think sometimes we get lost in the telling of a story, and we don't realize that our vulnerability and the way that we share our information of personal experiences can absolutely support the learning and healing of other people. And so there's always been a need, for storytellers in our history, in our collective, in our communities, right? There are multiple storytellers, and they showed themselves in variety of ways, right? For some folks, it was Pearl who sat on the steps, right, and kind of peeped game and shared what she saw in the day. For others, it's the rapper or the artist who took their experience and wove it into music. For some people, it's the poet, right, or the laureate that uses their experiences to lift up things that we want to work towards, all types of experience. And for others, it's the bunchinchera, which is the person who kind of gossips, right? Now, those stories we know usually cause a little bit of chaos and sometimes a little bit of problems. But ultimately, telling stories in this world can absolutely be utilized as a way to really not only create connections, but really help other people understand what those experiences felt like in real time. And it made me think deeply about would he have responded in the same way based on his statements, had he not had those conversations with me, right? And secondly, he could have heard those conversations. He could have heard the things I said, but maybe not ingest them in a way that says, I can make someone else's experience, that someone being someone I love deeply, very different. And be sure to create a safe space for her in this world, which is already dark and problematic on many, many fronts, right? And so I think so often we get worried about what other people will think of us, right? Like, I think we're in a place in the movie where, unfortunately, people worry about telling the truth because they've been taught that telling the lie is probably more profitable than telling the truth. What I'm suggesting is that we're actually now moving to the next part of the movie where telling the truth is probably going to be worth more than telling the lie. The second thing I thought would be important to bring up as a result of that story was like, there is healing for someone else in my pain, right? And so when I shared the story, it wasn't, I think we were just really chatting, and I don't know how we got onto the conversation. Honestly, it happened several years ago, and I really don't even remember those conversations. But what I know for sure is that I, growing up, had my own battles with that coming out process and what that meant for me and how much worth I lost or gained as a result of it. And the life would be different, the road would be tougher, all of the stuff, right? But what I always wondered was like, man, I wish for somebody else not to have that experience. I wish for someone else to be born into a world where you can be accepted as yourself for whomever you are, right? Not suggesting that that road is easy, but living your life in a way that others see you and respect you, whether it's their thing or not, is super important. And so imagine the world that we have if someone else's life is different, but who would have known, y'all, that it would have been his daughter's life? Like that, I was so gassed. Listen to him. Like, man, like it just in a million years, I never thought, while I hoped to tell stories for other people to not experience the pain I've experienced. Most of us tell stories for other people not to experience the pain we feel. You know, the parents are the worst, right? Like most parents tell their kids stories based on their experiences, praying that you don't encounter some of the challenges that we did. So we get why people do, right? But to understand and acknowledge that the pain you felt, other people won't feel because you've been able to add context to someone else's experience that ultimately results in impact in them experiencing life different, better, more safe, more included, whatever it is dope. So I want to encourage the storytellers out there who are known for telling their truth, but struggle to tell their truth because if they tell their truth, that somehow becomes problematic for everyone, right? Life is not getting any easier. But what I know for sure is that there are moments where you want to look back and say, like, am I proud of who I am? Am I proud of who I'm becoming? And I think in that exchange I had with him, the beauty was realizing like, wow, man, you're like, first of all, I would have never known that you would have had a problem with it. Number one, because he just is a dope human being. But second of all, I would have never realized the impact of words, right? And so in that moment, it really helped me know like, wow, this is powerful. And so often that piece gets lost, right? I think sometimes perspective is everything. And so, had his daughter came to him and they had a conversation, his initial reaction would have been what it is. But what's beautiful is that when you share your stories and your experiences with people you love and people you trust, what you realize is that if they value the words you have, oftentimes it's like depositing a rock in a pebble, a rock in a pond, right? You just kind of throw it in. You don't know where it is. You don't know where it lands, but you do think in that moment like, wow, I'm really grateful that I just deposited that, right? Or this was a great conversation, or this was a great experience, but you never actually anticipate or know what that information is going to do for someone else. And so for those of you who are out there and worrying about, do I tell my stories? Should I tell my stories? I mean, be careful of the stories you tell, right? Make sure that those stories are things that you want to share. But I think it's really important to realize that there's absolutely healing for someone else in your pain. And too often, when we don't share our experiences, when we are in a safe place, we deprive someone else of that learning, right? And so, don't get distracted. And then also that, we are a collective. And what that helped me realize is that each of us are individually living our lives. We are very much a collective, right? It's a group of people in and out, but ultimately nonetheless connected through our stories, through our experiences, right? And so making sure that the people around us are real friends, like real sisters, brothers, uncles, whatever, right? Like there's a community, because in that collective, there are all these examples and opportunities for us to learn from one another, things that we don't know. And while you can go read any book you want, like there's a bunch of books here, I recommend reading every one of them. The truth of the matter is, to me, experience will always trump anything in a book, anything, right? When you read something, you're like, okay, cool, I get it. Boom, that's theory. When you experience something and the weight of that, good or bad, that's practice. The emotions attached to that practice becomes your experience, right? The things you go through become that experience. When you then go into community with other people and you sit down and you think deeply and you talk and you share what it is you want to contribute, that's collective, right? That's community. That's what helps to kind of generate a pot of experiences that people can learn from and pick through and decide, how do I implement and impact my life by using this information I have? You don't have to use it all, y'all, but you do want to be in community with people who are willing to contribute, right? Not as a leader with people following, or as a group of people working together towards a common goal to make the world better. And in this context, a world better is just a safer, inclusive world where people can exist. Like right now, we're in a place where people don't feel safe at all for multiple reasons. And we have an opportunity that we can inform that, right? There's an opportunity for us to create safe space. And when people are sharing their experiences, like we have an opportunity to listen, because the other side of that for that particular young lady might have been a world of feeling like, man, I don't count, I don't matter, like the other side of that had maybe that not happen, right? And he, we talked a lot more than what I'm sharing with you, but I just wanted to give you the general notes because the details are irrelevant. But, he literally said, like, it made me think about what you shared, and it made me think about being the one who can create a different experience. And that's when I said, literally, like what I said earlier, it was like, man, I think of breaking generational curses. We talk about breaking generational curses. I never thought that my stories or what I do would help someone break their own, right? So I just thought that was a really important story to tell. And here's the other thing, y'all. A lot of times we're really focused on what everybody thinks about us. And someone told me several years ago, it's really none of your business what anybody believes or thinks about you. Like don't ask. It's none of your business. Keep doing what you do. Keep moving in your way. Keep walking your walk, your path, right? And I say that because I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I don't always know where they're going to go. I do my best to just have a conversation. Some are very focused and pointed, and some are kind of all over the map, right? But either way, when I have those conversations, I'm always showing up as myself. Like I'm not making it up or being disingenuous or showcasing something I'm not, or talking about an experience I didn't have. And people around you can typically tell if this is your experience or someone else's experience. And so, I don't know who's out there who needs to hear this, but like, I think there was a time in our world where our storytellers were really just uncles, aunts, grandparents, whatever, right? And they would tell you these stories, and some seemed real and some seemed fake, but you really weren't sure. But you listened to them. And then as you got older, some of the things they said started to make crystal clear sense. Like, oh, I totally get why they said that, right? So take that as a similar experience. When people are sharing things with you, regardless of if it's relevant in that moment or not, just deposit it and keep moving. Because there's probably a time you're going to come back that you need to retrieve that information, and it's going to totally make sense. What seemed to make no sense and be a little bit irrelevant becomes very relevant and makes a lot of sense. So um, do your best to not only show up, to add, but listen deeply from those around you, because that's really, really important. And I think the last piece that I just wanted to kind of lift up is imagine a place where everyone gets to show up as themselves, right? And I try to, I don't really talk about politics. I don't really talk about nonsense that's happening in the world because it's happening. We're watching it, just turn off your TV. It's like, whatever, right? But I don't think it takes a lot for us to recognize that the world's just a lot better when I get to show up and be me and you get to show up and be you. And so this is, again, just a call to action that, we have a great responsibility, each of us individually. And by default, by me making that connection with that particular person and him and I having a good relationship, as we talk, there's weight that goes attached to it, right? So like when I know someone really closely and feel like we have a deep relationship, the things I say mean more, right? Or at least have credibility. So I say that to say, as we're living in the world and we imagine a world where if people feel safe, they can be more impactful, innovative, then this is just a gentle push to really work on having deep relationships. And it doesn't have to be deep relationships with a bunch of people. I have deep relationships with like 4 or 5 really close friends, solid friends, good or bad. And I'm not talking about you having to talk to people every week, right? There are people that, you're super chill and you talk to them every couple of weeks, or you don't talk to them for 6 months, but they text you all throughout like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Know who's in the room with you and don't evaluate how many. Try to see the value of the people, because him and I have been friends for probably 5 years and we don't talk all the time, but every time we do talk, we have really deep conversations. So I hope that helps somebody out there, because let's be clear, a lot of things are going to happen that maybe don't seem like aligned necessarily with your values or your beliefs. And anybody who's a parent gets it. Like, it may not be necessarily sexuality, but it's certainly 1,000 other things that young people do that as a parent, you may say, oh, wow, I wouldn't have done that. And know that there may be these opportunities that you hear a story from someone else that can change or add context to the ways in which you look at the world. And if you don't evaluate the messenger, and you just listen to the message, it might inform your process. So I hope that was helpful for y'all. I hope you have an amazing week, kind soul. I will see you next week. And remember, do not let anyone take the J out of your joy, because that is yours. Have a great day. Take care. Peace.